Hi, Elaine here. Today I'll be sharing how to create a monthly log planner page in Affinity Publisher. This monthly log uses shapes, a table, a gradient, and Excel for its data, but it's not a data merge. It could be a data merge if you specifically wanted that, but in this case it's actually faster if it's not a data merge. So let's get going. It only needs to be a single page. I've gone for A4, so the layout is A4, the pages are 1, the colour is RGB. I am setting the margin slightly differently because I need a bigger margin at the top. So it's 10mm on the left, 10 on the right, 32 at the top and 15 at the bottom. And I don't need a bleed because it's for digital output. And create. First thing I'm going to need is a table. So over to the table tool. The table fits within the margins I've got set, but obviously if I draw that out, it's got far too many rows and far too many columns. I actually need 31 rows and 3 columns. I'm pulling that down to the right size. That is one way to do it. There's actually a marginally faster way. So let's delete that table, go back to the table tool. And it doesn't really matter where you do this, but I am starting from the origin in the top left corner. What I'm going to do is make sure that I've got 3 columns. And as I'm dragging down, slow down as I get to 31, release. And now use that corner point to pull it out. It's slightly faster because I don't then have to go and remove the extra rows and the extra columns. What I do need to do with this is make sure that column A and column B are much smaller than column C. So dragging that in, I know that 8mm is about right. And that is the base table. The next thing to do with it is to get the data into it. And my data is currently in Excel. You have a couple of options with this data. You could actually type it straight into Affinity Publisher and skip the Excel step. The reason that I haven't is because I've automated it. But this is completely optional. The automation for me means that I have 2 sheets, not 1. The monthly log sheet has the dates on it, but my variables sheet allows me to put a starting date in it. Now I want this for October, but let's say I didn't. Let's say I wanted it for May 2025. What I would type in here is the 1st of May 2025. Doesn't seem to have done anything other than change cell A1. But when I go back to my monthly log, the month is now starting on a Thursday. I picked May because it's my birthday. And what has updated in here, all the days are just day numbers, so they haven't changed, but the actual single character representing the day, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that has updated for May 2025. Now, as I say, I need October. So I'll go back and put October 2024 in it. And now when we look at the monthly log, you can see it starts on a Tuesday and runs through. Now, I said this is completely optional because you have 3 options. You could type it straight into Affinity Publisher. You could use Excel, but just type it into Excel. Or the third option, which is the one I've used, which is to automate it. I won't go into all the details of how I've automated it because all I'm going to do with the data now is copy it. So I've got A1 selected, I'm holding the Shift key down and I'm clicking B31 and copy. And that data is now copied. Back in Affinity Publisher, the data needs to go in column A and column B. So all I'm going to do is paste. For reasons best known to itself, it adds an extra row. Now I've got row 32, which I didn't ask for, nor do I want. So I'm going to click on the double-headed arrow, and I'm going to take that extra row away, so I'm back to having 31 rows. Next thing I'm going to do, make sure I've selected the entire table, and although the font was correct in Excel, it was Avenir. If we look at the font drop-down, we've got a question mark. Clicking in there and going down and finding Avenir, and I'm going to manually apply Avenir to it. And that precludes having any issues with it down the line. 12 points is fine, but I do want this text centered both horizontally and vertically. And that is it for the data. The rest is decoration. I have some colours in a palette, so I'm going to import those. Importing as a document palette. and it's called Halloween. Now the colours I have in here, one of them is a gradient and the other is the accent colour. You'll notice that the accent colour has the tiny triangle in the lower left indicating it's a global colour. The gradient does not, because a gradient cannot be global. Now when it comes to applying a gradient to a table, you're setting yourself up for problems if you try and do that. I have had it where I have managed to apply a gradient to the background of the cells. On other occasions, it's ignored the background and applied the gradient to the text. If I transfer a file from one machine to another, the gradient disappears. So stay away from it. Do it a different way. This way, I can predict it will work no matter what the platform is or any point release of Affinity Publisher. And that is to ignore the table when it comes to gradients. The way I do it is to get a shape. I want that shape at the moment on the top of the table. And then I need the gradient tool, so the G key. Draw that down. I have had questions as to why when I'm drawing a gradient do I draw it to the left or the right and not in the centre. And the reason for that is I don't want the endpoints of the gradient to be interfering with the sizing handles. In some apps they do, in some apps they don't. So my standard practice is to put the gradient to one side. It doesn't really matter where it is horizontally as long as the gradient is vertical. Now I could set this up manually by selecting the points and then choosing colours, but I actually have a gradient that I can apply in my colour swatch. Getting the Move tool and moving across to the swatches, as long as I've got that shape selected and I apply the Halloween gradient, it will apply it the way of the grey gradient. So it's going vertically. That's absolutely what I want. Obviously, I don't want it on top of the table. I want it behind the table. So I'm moving it to behind the table. At that point, I don't intend to do anything else with that gradient, so I might as well lock it. But back in the table, there are things that I need to do with it. The first thing is I don't need any borders on this. So making sure that I have selected all of the cells, I'm going to use the table panel and the border options. I'm going to select all the borders, which highlights them in blue on the canvas. And then instead of having it at 0.5, I'm going to take them all away. So there are no borders on there at all. Now that would actually make it difficult to use. If you were using this in GoodNotes or another digital notes app, it would be very easy for the text to start wandering away from a line. For that reason, what I actually want here is to have alternating row colours. With the Move tool, select the table. What I then need to do is to edit the table. I need the even numbered rows selecting. I'm holding the Command key down and selecting the even rows. With them selected, it's really simple. All I need to do is go back to the table panel, and in the fill, which is set to transparent at the moment, I'm going to select white in there. Once I click away, it looks like I've got alternating row colours, which indeed I have. That is a very, very manual way of doing that, and there is a better way. And I have a video coming out very soon that will explain how to automate that. But for today, that will do. Right now, though, it's more decoration. And the decoration is the text. So I'm getting the artistic text tool. Let me draw that out there. And this actually said monthly log. You could have that saying October or whatever your month is if you like. I'm going to use that Halloween font we've used before called October Twilight. And it looked about right at 40 points. And then just positioning that. I also had a shape behind that. This, of course, is completely optional, but mine went the full width. It didn't have a gradient in it, and it was 12 millimeters tall. So moving that behind the text and making sure I've got the fill set to the accent colour. Then I added some decoration with it being October and Halloween. For that, I used the stock panel. I put a search in there for Halloween, and I put a tick in vector, and it brought up a whole range of images. I loved my pumpkin, so let's put that on there and scale it. I had that somewhere near the top. The next one I had was a black cat. Quite difficult to see if you've got the interface set to dark, but there is a black cat in here, I promise you. And again, scaling that down. And the final one was a cobweb. which it hasn't actually returned in the search results this time. That's fantastic, isn't it? Okay, let's try actually typing in cobweb and seeing if I can find the right cobweb. I think that one will do. Now this one is very large. I don't particularly want the extra space on that. Now what you can do is there is a crop tool. This is the vector crop tool. What that's actually cropping is the bounding box of the image rather than your entire artwork. So I will take that up. I will probably actually cut a couple of pixels off on the bottom and on the left hand side. My rationale for that is so I can have it placed right at the bottom. So let's move that into position, make it a lot smaller. I would zoom into that to make sure it's right. So let's have a look. Not bad at all. And zoom back out. All of the direct links to those images are available in the description below. And there is your monthly log. So let's have a quick recap. I created a table. It was 3 columns by 31 rows. I had my data in Excel, but that was completely optional. If you decide to put your data in Excel, it can be automated like mine, or you can just create it manually. Potential incompatibilities meant that I didn't apply the gradient to the table, I applied it to a shape. I added a shape for the header, I added the title in the October Twilight font, and I added some images. 3 to be precise: the pumpkin, the cat, and the cobweb. And with that, you have a monthly log to track the highlights of your month. If you want new tutorials and tips and tricks on a regular basis, check out my free training at elainegiles.com/VIP. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss future tutorials. And if you have any requests for specific tutorials, be sure to contact me. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching and see you next time.